Hello and welcome to Passing the Torch, an online Bible study with your host and teacher, Bob Clark. Yeah, that's me. Today is Lesson 12 of Study 1 of a set of studies that we've been calling a Mosaic of Bible Prophecy. So this is a set of 8 studies in this total mosaic thing, and we're going to go into different aspects of end-time prophecy or eschatology. This first study that we're in right now is an introduction to and summary of Bible prophecy. All right, so we've been laying some groundwork up to this point, including this one. Next time we'll go into that summary of Bible prophecy. So this lesson 12 that we're in today, we're going to go into Matthew 24, really one specific phrase, this generation. When Jesus says, this generation shall not pass, what is he talking about? And that's what we're going to hit on today. So the outline that we've been following here in this first study, we've went through a number of things for an introduction to the introduction. Then we've laid some background for understanding Bible prophecy, specifically eschatology, end times prophecy. Then the last few lessons we've been talking about key timelines, and today is the last of those. Well, as I said, we're going to talk about this generation out of Matthew 24. Starting next time, we'll talk about a summary of Bible prophecies. So we'll actually dig into the prophecies themselves without going into a lot of scripture at this point. This is an overview. And then with the other 7 lessons, we'll go into a lot of scripture. All right? So what are we talking about today? We'll be talking about the Olivet Discourse, explaining what that is, timing words in Matthew 24, talk about which generation, then how long is a generation, so when does the end of this generation, and pulling it all back together. The Olivet Discourse. What is the Olivet Discourse? Well, Matthew chapter 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21 are all termed and described as the Olivet Discourse. Why that term? Because it was taught on the Mount of Olives, hence Olivet, all right? Discourse, this is Jesus' teaching his disciples. However, if we go and dig into it further, what we find out is Luke 21, even though it starts the same way, how does it start? You're probably familiar with this. This is in all 3 of these, it starts off with there'll be wars and rumors of wars, famines, earthquakes in diverse places, etc. All right. Nation against nation. It has very similar words, so everybody assumes this is all the same teaching on the Mount of Olives. However, if you dig into it further, you find out that Luke 21, even though it starts the same, it ends very different. And we'll explain this more in a later study. I think it's study 5 where we go into it. And we'll explain this in more detail. I'm not going to explain it totally right now. However, what I'm going to say for right now is Luke 21, even though Matthew 24 and Mark 13 were Jesus teaching the disciples on the Mount of Olives, hence Olivet Discourse, Luke 21 was actually not on the Mount of Olives, but on the Temple Mount earlier in the day. And it wasn't just to the disciples, it was to everybody that was there. All right? And whereas Matthew 24 and Mark 13 are about end times, that is eschatology, Luke 21, it lists a bunch of signs, and then instead of saying, and after these things, it says, but before these things. It was actually talking about the fall of Jerusalem or fall of the temple and the partial destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So it's talking about different events. All right, that's important for us to understand. But I think I'll wind up mentioning that piece of it later. All right? So Jesus gives us timing that appears to be linked to his second coming, especially in Matthew 24 and Mark 13. We're just going to concentrate on the Matthew 24 account. So there are a number of timing words in Matthew 24. So let's read through Matthew 24, looking for these timing words. We'll start at verse 3. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, he being Jesus, all right? As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, all right? I don't want to teach through all of this, but it's just my nature that I want to dig into every little piece here. So I'll try to limit it. But so is this talking about all 12 disciples came to him? No, we find out in the book of Mark, it adds a piece. We find out this is really just Peter and his brother Andrew, James and his brother John. So it's 4 disciples. Came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" All right? So, when will these things be? He's just, what we had just found out is he had said that, talking about the Temple Mount, or the temple, that not one stone will be left on top of the other, etc. So, when will these things be, and what are the signs? Let me keep going. "And Jesus answered and said to them, Take heed that no one deceives you." Key principle in studying end-time prophecy. Take heed that no one deceives you. Verse 5, "For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet." All right, so we look at these things, and our automatic thought is to think, oh, these are the first signs of the end times. There'll be wars and rumors of wars. What he's really saying is these are not signs. He says, but the end is not yet. So a timing word, the end is not yet. It's not just because you see wars is not the issue. Now he starts getting into some of the actual signs of the end. And it's real easy to think that he's still just saying the same thing, but he's not. "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." Well, isn't that the same as wars and rumors of wars? All right, at least one Bible teacher that I listen to often says that this is a Jewish idiom for world wars. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. That it's really talking about world wars. Is that correct? Not quite sure, but let's read the rest of this. "And there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows." What is this term, beginning of sorrows? It means birth pangs. All right? So, I have a daughter-in-law who just had my 3rd grandchild, and a daughter that's about to, any day now, going to have my 4th grandchild. They have, before the baby is born, they have what's called Braxton Hicks contractions. It's the body rehearsing and practicing how to have the real contractions to deliver the baby. That's what this is talking about. In the same way that when you see these things increasing in intensity and the timing getting shorter between these various signs, then that's the beginning of sorrows. You know that the tribulation is right around the corner. Then, what does then mean? Then means after those things. After those signs, not before those signs. After those signs, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. And you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Okay, first of all, who's he talking to? He's talking specifically to the Jewish people, but he actually here may also be talking to those who are born again during the tribulation. All right, let's keep going. Jump over to verse 15. "Therefore, when is a timing word. So, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place," whoever reads, let him understand. Okay, what is the abomination of desolation? We talked about that in the last lesson. It was a very, very long lesson, okay? That's what we talked about then. It's when the Antichrist sets up a statue in the Holy of Holies in the newly built temple, all right? Then, when you see the abomination of desolation in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. For then there will be, skipping over to verse 21, for then there will be great tribulation. When is that? The second 3.5 year period of the 7-year tribulation, or the 70th 7-year period that Daniel talks about. All right? So that last 3.5 years before Jesus comes back. Then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor ever shall be. All right, we see there's a bunch of timing words here. Verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. All right, so 7-year tribulation, the last half of which is the great tribulation. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the signs of the Son of Man will appear. Sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, I know talking about gathering together the elect, that sounds like the rapture. But here's your hint for today. That's not the rapture of the church. We'll go into that more in future studies. All right? Right now we're just reading through to find timing words. Verse 32. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch, I should have highlighted that in the chart. When its branch is already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, that is, all these signs, know that it is near, at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. So we're getting into that. What is this generation? So which generation is he talking about? Let's read these verses again. So starting at verse 32. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. We'll talk about what is the fig tree. When that is the fig tree's branches, when its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near, at the doors. What's he talking about, near at the doors? Those signs that he was talking, or rather the tribulation, that part of it. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation, that's what we'll talk about, will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Till you see, even, the great tribulation, you see the abomination of desolation, you'll see the sun darkened and such as that. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. All right? So this generation will see all these things. We'll see the completion of those things. This generation. Which generation was Jesus referring to that would see all these things? That's the big question that we're talking about today. So we've talked about the different ways of interpreting the Bible. The preterists and many historicists will point to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD as the end point of this prophecy. That is the end point of this generation. Believing that Jesus was indicating this generation was the people listening to him at that moment. All right? However, to believe that, you have to allegorize this part of that. So reading this was right before what we just read about the fig tree. Right before that, it says, immediately, not 50 years, not 1,000 years, not 2,000 years after, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Has that happened? No. So that's not the generation that he was talking about. Now he uses that same phrase, this generation shall not pass away. He uses that same phrase in Luke 21. That, from best I can tell, that is talking about the generation that he was talking to, because that was the people on the Temple Mount. He was talking about the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, when they were trying to have an uprising. It was 38 years after that 38 years after Jesus gave that message, that the temple was destroyed and a lot of Jerusalem was destroyed. All right? So that makes sense there, but not in Matthew, because it's talking about the end times, not the 70 AD destruction. So then which generation? When that is the fig tree's branch, has already become tender and puts forth leaves. That's the key piece. It is typically taught by people that, I'm going to say, traditional dispensationalists. All right? Which, that's the approach that we're taking. Traditional dispensationalism says that the fig tree is a symbol of Israel. Now, some people say it's not really Israel. It's talking about all the because in the book of Luke it says, consider the fig tree and all the trees. That's the book of Luke, not Matthew. In Matthew it says, just refers to the fig tree, and a lot of people say that's a symbol of Israel. And it's typically taught to measure this generation from either the reestablishment of Israel as a nation on May 14th of 1948, that would be the starting point, and go one generation from there, and that's when everything has to be completed. Or when Israel retook the old city of Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, on June 7th of 1967 during the Six-Day War. A lot of people say that was it. That was the start of this generation. Now you can also say that even though they retook the Temple Mount, do they own the Temple Mount? No, they don't. They own it, but they're not the caretakers of it. There's a group from Jordan who takes care of the Temple Mount. That's the reason the Jewish people are not allowed up there without causing a ruckus. But this is traditionally what dispensationalists teach, is that this generation is measured from one of these 2 points. So now we get into how long is a generation. So if that's the starting point, how long is a generation, so we know when all this stuff is supposed to be fulfilled? Is it 38 years? If you're talking about in Luke, when Jesus says this generation, it was 38 years from 32 AD to 70 AD. All right? From the disobedience of the children of Israel at Kadesh Barnea, that is when they refused to go into the promised land, until the border of Moab, that was 38 years. So Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 14. And the time we took to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the valley of Zered, that's Moab's border, was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war was consumed from the midst of the camp, just as the Lord had sworn to them. All right? So this is saying that a generation is 38 years. And as I said, that was also the time from Jesus's resurrection, or for when he gave his talk, his discourse on the Temple Mount, until the temple was destroyed, was 38 years. Or is it 40 years for a generation? So you can say from the disobedience of Israel to crossing of the Jordan, to the crossing of the Jordan, to take the land, starting at Jericho, was 40 years. So Numbers chapter 32, verse 13. So the Lord's anger was aroused against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. Okay, so now we have 38 years, we have 40 years. Well, what about 70 or 80 years? Where do we get that from? Psalm 90, verse 10, and it's really just the first part that we're going to read. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they are 80 years, that would indicate 70 to 80 years as a generation. But just note this one thing. This psalm was actually written by Moses. It's the only psalm in the Bible written by Moses to the children of Israel who were under a curse because of not going into the promised land as they were instructed. So does that mean that we're limited to 70 or 80 years? No, we're not. Okay, but that's a possibility that it may be 70 to 80 years as a generation. Well, what about 100 years? God spoke to Abraham, or Abram, who was later Abraham, he changed his name, about his descendants. And in that, this is Genesis chapter 15, we're going to read really just 13 and 16. Then he, that is God, said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, talking about Egypt, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years, skipping over to 16. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So if we do the math there, 400 years divided by 4 generations is 100 years per generation. And it turns out that Moses was the 4th generation. All right? So this indicates maybe a generation is 100 years. What about 120 years? Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. Now, do I think that this is the case? No, but I threw this in because I could see some people may want to grab onto this. Genesis 6, 3. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. That sounds like a generation's 120 years. Well, what's right? All right, well, let's think of it this way. So when is the end of this generation? And if you can see the chart, I have a table up here. And in the left-hand column, it is the years per generation, the ones we just looked at. So 38, 40, 70, 80, 100, and 120. Multiplying that by 360 days per year, you get the number of days in that time period of a generation. Why 360? We've already talked about that. That's what a prophetic year is, 360-day years. Then we took that number of days and added it to the reestablishment of Israel on May 14th of 1948. So that's the middle column in this table. The next column is adding that same amount of time to when the old city of Jerusalem was taken, June 7th of 1967. And then the last column on the right is the Bible reference that we just referred to for each of these things. All right? So we see that if it's 38 years, well, that was and the start was when Israel was reestablished. That was 1985. It was 40 years. It was 87. Those are long since passed. If it was 70 years, that would be 2017. So that's past. If it was 80 years, 2027. So at least that's a little bit in the future. 100 years, 2046. And 120 years, 2066. What if you add that to the June 7th of 1967? If it's 38 years, that's 2004. If it's 40 years, it's 2006. Those have long passed. Okay, now 70 years is 2036. 80 years is 2046. 100 years, 2065. And 120 years is 2085. Now remember, these are years of 360-day years, right? So, which of these is correct? Well, really, you got to ask the question, are these two really the fig tree? And I'm not going to answer the question this time. Okay? We're exploring this. We're not explaining it at this point. We're going into different avenues. I want you to think about it. If I tell you everything, you're not going to learn but just so much. If you stop to think, it'll register on the inside, and you're going to start allowing the Holy Spirit to reveal things from the Bible to you. If I can get that to occur, cool. That would be, I would consider this Bible study a success. So now let's pull all this back together, okay? All the things we've talked about. So, not going to read the verses again, but I'm just going to read that one line. Assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. That's the key phrase. This generation will not pass away till all these things pass away. This generation that sees all these things is the generation that sees the fig tree put forth leaves. All right? That's what it's saying. The generation that sees the fig tree put forth leaves will see everything happen. So it could be measured from the reestablishment of Israel, from the retaking of the old city of Jerusalem, or possibly something else. And I'll go ahead and spoiler alert, when we get into the next study that we're going to do is the traditional dispensational approach to Bible prophecy. And then we're going to talk about an Islamic Bible approach, or an Islamic approach rather. And then we'll talk about a non-traditional approach that still meets what the Bible says. And we're going to revisit this at that time. But I needed to set some groundwork. Now, assuming that a generation is 38 to 120 years, we cannot know when the rapture of the church will take place. By definition, it could be sooner than any of us expect. In reality, the rapture of the church could come before I finish all of these lessons. It could come before I finish this one and before the next chart. By definition, all right? So, we know that there will be a generation that does not pass and that sees all these things. That's what we've come down to. We don't know when that generation is. We can take some guesses. The reestablishment of Israel, the retaking of the old city of Jerusalem, but we're not sure yet, okay? So, next time, we've laid all this groundwork, we're finally going to start summarizing the eschatological view of dispensational Bible interpretation. I don't know if that sentence made any sense or not. We're going to start talking about end-time Bible prophecy and give you an overview of it. How about that? So next time, it's a traditional pre-tribulational rapture scenario. And then we're going to go into the lesson after that, talk about Islamic eschatology. Why are you going into that? Trust me, it ties in. Or it doesn't. You can choose not to tie it in. A lot of people have rejected that. And then we're going to talk about an untraditional speculation of pre-tribulational rapture scenario. And really, the reason for doing that is I want to show you that if you change your assumptions, it makes the story a little different. Actually, a lot different. And at the end of the day, no, the rapture can be sooner than we think. So I hope that you come back next time as we start into Bible, an actual overview of specific Bible prophecies and lay out the dispensational, pre-tribulational rapture view. So, hope to see you next time here on Passing the Torch. So long.